Hey folks, welcome back for another video tutorial. Today, Uncle Stinky Linc is going to show you the easy way that I use to apply decals to models and the simple steps I go through. It's not the only way I do it, but it's nice and simple, and I'll do a quick test of the micro set versus Ma.K Setter product and share the results. Okay, let's go. A nice glossy surface works best for applying decals, so I'm going to use some Mr. Super Clear semi-gloss here and spray a very fine coat over the model. Give the can a nice swirl. It's a good idea to put your model on top of something that you can spin around so that you don't have to touch it directly whilst it's wet or you'll fingerprint it. Then shooting in very short, quick bursts, apply mist coats over the entire model. If you only apply mists, even using a lacquer spray like this over acrylic paints will be more than fine. You can see here on the back of the model where it's dark red there, that's acrylic paint, and the lacquer paint here didn't bother it at all. The most important tip I can give you on this is to not overspray in the same area until you let the previous coat dry, just for a few seconds here, and don't let the thinner pool. The thinner in these cans is super hot and it will burn almost any paint under it. So let it dry quickly and move the model, quick short bursts, and you'll be fine. And it works really well. Very easy, very quick. If only my bench always looked this neat and tidy. Now I got set up so I could show you guys the basic tools that I use for a decaling session. You can see water, decals, some solution, knives, scissors, tweezers, and a glossy model. I know this is going to sound funny, but have a plan before you start cutting out your decals. I mean, sometimes I haven't, then I sit down and I wonder what I'm doing. I've chosen the scheme at the top of the page, so first things first, I'll go with the decals that are situated closest to the edge of the sheet. It just makes them nice and easy to cut out, and then as we dig our way into the center of the decal sheet, we can get access to the smaller ones in the middle. Here I'm using some proper decal scissors from Tamiya, but it's not super necessary. You can use any small, sharp scissors that work nicely and cut out a nice neat polygon around the outside of your decal. Yes, you can also trim the film around the outside of the decals, particularly if they're a nice straight shape, but I'll leave that for a more advanced video in the future. And to be perfectly honest, I just don't do it much anymore. I find that this method works well enough, at least for my level of modeling anyway. Did you notice that I cut out the ID markings in pairs? I keep them in a little Ziploc bag for future use and to swap them around with other Maschinen Krieger builds. Here we go, cutting deeper into the decal sheet. And I'll get some of these smaller ones ready and do a couple of them in a batch. Pour some water into two small dishes, one medium size and one very small for the tiny decal. The small dish is very convenient in case they float off, and you know, it happens. The return of my Do Anything brush, Excalibur. I touch it into the water to make it a bit sticky, pick up one of the decals, place it back into the smaller dish. This is a small one. You know how sometimes if you leave it in there for a few minutes and they go swimming off? I love it when that happens. Decal solutions are a very cheap way to get great results when doing decals. I'm going to use Micro Set here, the blue one, and with the same brush I apply a little bit onto the model where I'm going to place the decal. Using some fine tweezers, these happen to be by Tamiya, but they don't need to be. I carefully take the decal out of the water, hold it off camera so that you can't see it, and I spin it around in my fingers so that I can easily slide the decal off into position as I want it to end up being with that brush that I used before. And often I'll load that brush with the decal solution as well. One of the functions of the solutions is to provide a wetting agent. It seems to allow the decal itself to lay down very closely to the surface. And it seems to have some additives in there that help the decal to soften and slightly conform to the surface you're applying it to. And that's where the gloss coat really helps, because the gloss coat helps to make the surface smooth. It will help get rid of air bubbles and allow it to dry without silvering the white effect around the outside of the decal, which you really don't want. It looks terrible. We want that much vaunted painted on look. The decal solution also allows me to gently nudge the decal into position, and then once I've got it close to where I want it, boom, that's it. I'll leave it alone and put it aside. When using Micro Set, I usually cap it in between applications because it's a very tippy bottle, and you know, there's nothing worse than spilling a brand new bottle of something, right? The character I'm doing here is Queen of Spades. So these spades decals are quite broad and they're going to go on the side skirt hip armor, and it's quite curved. So these are going to be a very good test piece for us. Placing them into the larger dish to allow them to soften up, and I'm using regular tap water. Here's the hip armor, and I thought this would be a really good opportunity to do a side-by-side test. I'm reasonably familiar with Hasegawa decals. This would allow me to do a side-by-side test of the Micro Set versus the GSI Krios Mr. Ma.K Setter products, and see if there's any difference between them, see if one works better than the other. To keep it uniform, let's go with micro set across the right side, looking from our right of the model, and we'll go with Mr. Ma.K Setter on the left side. One big difference you immediately see with Mr. Ma.K Setter is that it's a slightly milky consistency. It has some white powder sediment in the bottom, and the instructions say that it has a glue component to it. And you will notice that you'll need to clean off a little bit of residue if you put too much on around the sides of the decal. One thing I really do like about Mr. Ma.K Setter is the built-in brush and applicator. It's very easy, and it's easy to put the lid back on, and it's not tippy at all. You put it back down, and I've never spilt a bottle of this. It's nice and easy. You can see that I give the decals a gentle poke to see that they've lifted off and that they're free of their backing paper, and gently slide them into position there. I'm using a flat brush, again from Tamiya. Realistically, you can use any brush, but I did find this shape of brush, and because it's a little bit stiffer, I found it easier and a little bit more direct to push the decals into place. You can see it's quite quick there. I'm going with micro set here on the right. I'll go with the round soft brush there. It'll just hold a little bit more solution than will the flat brush. And just proving I have half a brain, I'll actually put the subject matter in the middle of the video. Now look at that. Uncle Stinky Linc for the win. So dampening down, and I've made sure to put it around the edges there so that I know that it'll go a little bit up under the decal, if that makes sense. That's nice and easy. Now let's do the same again on the left side with Mr. Ma.K Setter. And again, the brush is a little stiff, that's a little wide, but nice and easy. And changing back to the flat brush again, just to do a few minor touch-ups for positioning. Then quickly going through the same steps again for the Q, the Queen, decals that will go on the shoulder plates. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that I work off the kitchen paper, the absorbent towel here, and I like to edge the decal cardboard onto it to drain off the excess water. So that's how we can replace it with the decal solution. Again, going with micro set on the right side, looking from our perspective. I make sure to try to grip the decals in the way that they would go onto the model. Here I did it completely the wrong way. Oh yes, I did that on purpose. Not. But here, because the surface has plenty of the decal solution on it, you could see I could spin it around 180 degrees pretty easily. I like to think that I always do things in the most efficient and clever way, but the truth of the matter is I don't. I make beginner rookie mistakes every time. Oh, except that time. It actually went on really well. Nice. Let's try out some of these small decals on the feet onto the heavily textured areas. This will be fun. Small decals, small dish. We'll pop them in the water there. Gives them a little bit of help in submerging below the surface so they soften up properly. Now please watch carefully here. I'm holding it the correct way, but it flips around on my brush and it goes onto the back side of it. So I just flip the brush around and apply it backhanded onto the model. It'll happen quite often, that sort of thing. But don't panic. You can put them on, even if you accidentally do it the wrong way around, it's no problem. Just pick it up, flip it over, put it back down. There we go, decals put into place, and you can see that they add a lot of visual detail as well as a level of sharpness that contrasts against the hand-painted camouflage pattern. Working from the outside is easier, but sometimes you will need to cut decals from the inside of the sheet. For that purpose, I keep a small, sharp hobby knife ready, and I cut a nice polygon shape around it. If you're working on particularly small scale models, it might be a good opportunity now to trim off the excess film around the outside. This is a 1/20th scale kit, and the film ends up being not very apparent. So I leave it. I mean, it's things like that can really help you to speed along a model. There are some things that you just need to forgive yourself with and move on. And that will make your modeling life a lot more enjoyable. Okay, quick recap of decaling 101. Pre-wet the surfaces, your target surfaces here, where you want to put them. Pick your decals up, get rid of the excess water on a paper towel. Pick them up in the right direction so that you make it easy for yourself in sliding them on. Use a soft brush, slide them into place like that. You have a little bit of working time, so I often do 2 or 3 at once. You don't have to panic. You've got quite a bit of time. Gently slide them into position. Nudge them into place with another brush. Once they're in a good spot, set them aside to dry and leave them. Say give them 12 hours. I let them go overnight. I like to do decals in the afternoon or early evening, leave the model overnight, and then I come back to it the next morning and it's fine to work on. Now some decals just won't cooperate. These ones laid down fairly well, but you can see these ones stayed completely flat. They wouldn't contour to the surface whatsoever. For those ones, use these products, Mr. Ma.K Softer or Micro Sol, the red one. And what they do is they melt the decal slightly so that it conforms down to the surface, and they work super well. They're also deceptively simple in that you just apply it like you do the first step, but there's a super big difference. Don't retouch them. Once you put this stuff on, don't rehandle or retouch the decal whatsoever, because it really softens them up and you'll often destroy the decal in place, and it's heartbreaking once you've done all of the work and you've gotten to this stage and you have a decal melt apart on you. Just set them aside and you'll see they'll soften down like this, and it's like magic. Okay, test results. You've got the micro set series on the right and then Mr. Ma.K setter on the left there, and you can see there's just not much in it. I mean, we didn't expect there to be a big difference. Both products work pretty well. I go into a little bit more detail and I show some more close-ups of the exact differences, and that's available for my Patreon subscribers. But for the purposes of this, I mean, both products work really well, and there would be no mistake buying either one of them, so just get the one that's easily available for you. For me in Japan, it was Mr. Ma.K setter, and then when I travel to Australia, it's the micro set. I feel like I really contributed something to man's knowledge of the useless. Okay, cool. Now I know. Now we all know. Thanks. Now to finish off, I've let these dry off overnight, and I'm basically reversing, going back to the very first process, and doing some Mr. Super Clear straight over the top of the decals. Now again, these are, they're water-based decals. The Mr. Super Clear is a lacquer-based spray, but it doesn't bother it whatsoever. Short, sharp bursts, misting it on, continuously moving the model around, and that will put a nice sealing coat on it, and it will protect it from further weathering steps. So using enamel thinners and things like that over the top of the Mr. Super Clear, more than fine. And that's it, you're done. All good to go. Now, after this, I set it aside for a few hours, maybe overnight, and then it's on to weathering steps, which I'll show next. Please subscribe, don't miss out, and I'll see you next time. Cheers, bye. Thank you very much for watching this with us. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like our content, we have a lot more. We also run a private membership website called Patreon. We also support a thriving, exclusive Facebook group. Please click the link at the top right of your screen and come and check us out. And of course, thank you very much for considering subscribing to the YouTube channel. Thanks guys, see you again soon, bye.